Hi, I'm junniseoul. Welcome to my Zeri guide. I'm a master 450 LP peak player and I've been playing Zeri since release, and I'm also the NA rank 1 Zeri. So in this guide I'm going to explain how I play Zeri and how she should be played. So I'm going to start with how I think of Zeri as a champion. So Zeri is not an auto attack based champion. She's a spell based ADC. That's the mindset I have when I play Zeri. I play Zeri with the idea that she's a AD mage rather than like a typical marksman, right? Because she's very different compared to the other marksmen. You know, um, when you think about the other ADCs, or just most marksmen in general, they're looking to scale with their auto attacks, right? Which is why it takes them so long to scale, because all their damage comes out in the form of their auto attacks and not their abilities, right? Which is why we have other builds in the game now, right? Like lethality Caitlyn, lethality Varus, right? Because they're looking to scale with their abilities and not auto attacks, right? All their damage comes out through their Q, right? Both Caitlyn and Varus, right? When they're doing lethality, a lot of their damage comes out early game from their Q, right? Their skill shots. Right, which is why they seem to spike so much more quickly. So this is why I personally max W on Zeri, right? So Zeri's W is our Q ability on other ADCs, and our Q is just like an auto attack that's still scaling. So I play her as a burst champion, more opportunistic on kills, but still flexible enough to space out fights as a TPS. Right, so now let me explain why I max my W first. So I max my W first because both Q and E are scaling abilities, right? So when we look at our Q, the base damage is 15 and it only goes up by 2 per rank up to 23. The rest of the damage is based on a percentage of our total AD going from 104% to 120%. But the main problem is that we don't really have a lot of AD until mid to late game, so realistically we only went up about 30-40 damage max per Q. That being said, it's part of the reason why we max our E last. So our E is most definitely a scaling ability because the on-hit damage that we gain scales with 85% of our crit chance, which means we don't get maximum value until late game, right? And on top of that, the pierce damage is also based on our Q damage, and it doesn't even do 100% of our Q damage until rank 5. Right, so when you consider the fact that Q is already weak in early mid game since it's based on our total AD, right? Pierce damage is not real. It's also unrealistic to be hitting every single enemy because our Q range is relatively short, right? To be hitting like all 4 or 5 enemies, you have to be in really close range, or you need to have the perfect setup, right? So rather than trying to use it for damage, you should try to use it as a get out of jail free card, especially considering the fact that it's a really high cooldown, right? It's a lot more effective as a get out of jail free card because you can dash through pretty much like any wall, right? And you can also buffer a lot of CC with this dash, right? Whether you get Leona stunned, right? Like as long as it's a stun or root, most CCs, right? Even silences, right? You can buffer all those CCs with the dash, right? The only ones that will actually take you out of this this dash are knockups, knockbacks, and suppressions, right? But there aren't really too many suppressions, especially in the bot lane. And any of the knockups or knockbacks, those champions are really telegraphed when they want to try and like use those abilities, such as like any of the hook champions, Dash, Nautilus, Pike, Blitzcrank, right? All of those should be reactable. So that being said, right, when we look at our W has a lot of base damage in it, starting at 30, going up by 40 per rank, up to 190. And it also has a 130% AD multiplier, on our total AD. So the active damage is already way higher, not including the fact that it's also a guaranteed crit when it's empowered. Right, that's the crit sign. So this is why Zeri is a lot more bursty in early mid game, right? Just given the fact that her ulti itself is also like this large, it's this big AoE nuke. Your passive auto is this max HP magic damage auto, and your W is like this AoE guaranteed 100% crit laser, right? So big forms of damage, lots of good forms of burst. Alright, one more thing I wanted to mention regarding W max is the significance of IE second. Alright, so let's say we get 2 BF swords, right? It's gonna be plus 80 AD. Our AD is 164 right now. Our W is going to do 706 to the semi, right? But let's say we get IE plus a longsword, right? So we're still 164 AD. Now our W will be doing 868 damage, right? So not a lot of people actually realize that because our W is a guaranteed crit, it benefits from the bonus crit damage that IE gives, right? So this also applies to the ulti chain lightning, right? So let's say I have, I don't know, say BT and a whole ton of, just say crit cloaks, right? My ulti and then my chain lightning is going to show up as 72, right, on crit. But if I get IE now, and keep in mind that IE is 10 less AD than BT, right? So on my crits, our chain lightning is actually 83 now, right? So please try to get IE as soon as possible, right? Try not to delay it as it's a huge amp item for damage on Zeri. Okay, so Zeri's build. Your core build is going to be Static Shift, IE, Runons, and LDR. Right, your boots will obviously be in there. I personally grab my boots after Static Shift because they nerfed Berserker Goose in the beginning of the split, so it's 10% less attack speed, and it does kind of hurt. So I personally would just set on like tier 1 boots and save the extra 800 gold and invest the rest into Static Shiv, right? Given the fact that it's 2700 gold for 45 AD, 30% attack speed, and 4% move speed. On top of that, you're also getting the Static Shiv passive. Having that Shiv damage for champions or even extra wave clear, it feels really nice. And then before we talk about IE really quickly, I want to mention Yuntal. So we don't build Yuntal at all, even with the slight buffs they gave it this patch, because it's just too hard to build and not effective enough to be our first or second in-slot item, right? Because static is just a lot better than Yuntal, as it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier to build, and has more relevant stats for us. Just on Zeri in particular, like obviously the crit chance is nice, as well as the extra 30% attack speed from the Yuntal passive, but static's value as first slot item is just so good. It outperforms Yuntal in so many ways, I feel like, even when you get to fully stack the Yuntal. Which is why even as second item, it's not good, because IE is significantly better as our second slot item, especially given the fact that we maxed our W, so it, just the fact that it's a guaranteed crit when empowered, it's such a huge power item for us, right? We don't really want to delay our IE more than we may have to, and having Runons, like it's less single target damage, but we're not really killing people in 1v1s anyway. That's not what our champion is for. We're supposed to be this team fighting machine that's able to do a whole ton of like AoE damage, right? For example, right, like all this chain lightning and having the Runon bolts for the extra DPS in these grouped fights, it's just a huge synergy that we don't really have the space for Yuntal in the build, right? And obviously LDR is better because we have the 35% armor pen, or even if it's not LDR, then we need Mortal Reminder. And for your last item, it's Situational Reflex. Bloodthirster or Guardian Angel are great options. But if you have an enchanter support like Yumi, or if you're simply fed enough, then I personally really like Yumi's, as it's a really cost efficient item, and it serves as like a mini ghost item too. Because for 2800 gold you're getting 55 AD, 18 lethality, and 4% move speed. And if you get to activate the active, then you're getting move speed too. I also feel like lethality is a really underrated stat on Zeri, given how much physical damage she actually does. So, this is what I would consider like a really good build on Zeri, or just a strong build, right? Otherwise, this is probably one of your standard builds here. Okay, so I personally don't run Lethal Tempo. This is because Lethal Tempo isn't as good as you think it is, right? So Zeri's Q that stops at the first enemy hit means that this ability can be body blocked by like minions or monsters, right? So if we're trying to apply Lethal Tempo on this target dummy here, right, this minion is going to get in my way, right? So even if I use E to pierce through, this is not stacking up Lethal Tempo for us, right? The target dummy, right, the enemy champion must be the first thing we hit in order for Lethal Tempo to actually stack up, right? And even if you did have Lethal Tempo stacked up, you won't always be able to apply the on-hit damage, nor will you be able to apply that damage to the target of choice, because on top of the fact that it's like a relatively short range skill shot for like an ADC to be considered like an auto attack, this is a skill shot that you can miss. And if this is the carry in the back here, your Lethal Tempo damage will be going to whoever's in front. Okay, so I'm just gonna disable the minions to show you guys a little bit better. Even if we have Lethal Tempo stacked up here, and we pierce through, the Lethal Tempo damage is going to whoever's in front. So even if majority of our Q were to hit like the target in the back, if part of our Q like in the beginning hits the first target, that's where our Lethal Tempo damage is going to. That's where any of our on-hit damage is going to, which is also why on-hit items such as like Kraken or Bork, it's not actually great on Zeri. Okay, so because Lethal Tempo has been ruled out, the other two keystone runes that we want to be running in the precision tree is we want to be able to use either Fleet Footwork when we're playing against double ranged matchups, or we want to use PTA against short ranged and really beefy teams, right? So preferably if they have a super tank top lane and if they have like a tank support as well. It's really easy to use when you have when you're playing into a tank support, because most of the time they will be trying to jump on you, and when they do, right, all you have to do is just auto attack that same target 3 times. So even though press the attack in concept is the same as Lethal Tempo, it's a lot easier to stack up because you just need to auto the same target 3 times. And if it's a tank, really easy, and this rune will stay active as long as you're in combat, right? And the best thing about this rune is that because it's increasing all of your damage, right? Us being Zeri, being an AoE type of champion, it increases our damage by so much, right? Especially when we have like the static shiv with the Runons, right? All that extra AoE from our W as well, right? Just anything and everything that hits while PTA is active, it's just a huge damage amplifier. So the rest of the runes, you would want to run Absorb Life, because Zeri is a relatively short range ADC. Having Absorb Life just helps a ton for laning phase, right? To give you that extra sustain that you need. Alacrity for the attack speed for your Q cooldown, and just maybe a little bit of extra AD in the late game. Cut down almost always, or basically always, right? Because our job as ADC, we just want to do damage, and most of the time we will be entering these fights against enemy teams who are pretty much full HP, right? Us as ADCs, we're not supposed to be the executioners We're just here to do damage, right? If we get to kill, obviously that's great, but you know, first things first is always damage, right? That being said, your second tree, if you're running PTA, then always absolute focus Gathering Storm. Otherwise, if you're forced to run Fleet because of a double ranged matchup in the bot lane, right, you're gonna get poked out, then you need to run Fleet with D-Shield start, and your secondary runes are going to be Biscuits, and if you like cashback just to scale a little bit faster, right, then that's fine. Otherwise, Jack of all trades, it works just as well, right? Jack of all trades is a little bit better in terms of stats for later, but cashback will help you scale faster. Okay, so Hob is the last rune set that we're going to talk about. The way Hob works on Zeri is in early game, it's good for trading as it lowers your QCD, and in mid to late game it acts as an AD buff for several Qs, right? So here I'm going to show you the interaction at levels 1 to 2, right? So level 1, right, or level 2, right, the Q cooldown will be reduced, right? As you can see, it was reduced to 0.87 and now it's 1.37, right? But once our Hob comes back up, right, and say we have E, so E acts as an auto attack reset for Hob, right, since it's a Q reset. So Hob will be active for 4 Qs. Right, so 1, 2, 3. Right. It's technically 4 Qs if you count the first one to activate Hob. Right, so really healthy trade patterns, really efficient trade patterns actually for US Zeri player in early game. And as you reach late game, right, here we are capped out on our attack speed. We're at 266. If we auto attack with Hob now, we're getting plus 56 AD, right? So we're 322 AD now. And the best part about Hob is that AD will stay active so long as you're spacing out your Qs, or you know, until you either let Hob expire or until you use up all the Qs, right? So for example, if I Q here, right, Hob's active, into reset, and that's the 4th Q. Right, this particular rune set also gives you a lot of AD as you scale into the late game, right? Having absolute focus plus Gathering Storm, plus the eyeball collection and Hob, right? It's all a lot of sources of AD. So once you peak into maybe 35 minutes or 40 minutes of the game and your full build with, you know, I don't know, like let's say this current build, right, with BT and you have Hob, right, we're gonna have 402 AD. We don't even have an elixir, nor are the rest of our runes stacked up, right? So for example, if I just quickly stack our runes for eyeball collection, you know, now we have 364 AD, and I'm just gonna grab the elixir to kind of show you, right? We're only 6 minutes into the game. Gathering Storm itself is not active yet. Right, we're at, you know, 30 minutes into the game, we're gonna get plus 29 AD, right? So we're already looking at 430-ish AD. We're close to 500 AD at the 30-minute mark for a full build with an elixir. That's crazy amounts of AD for a Zeri in particular. Okay, so before we actually start talking about Zeri mechanics, the first thing I want to mention or discuss are Zeri's E and W angles, right? So first one being the fountain dash, right, that a lot of you guys do. You guys dash all the way over here after standing here, right, super deep in fountain. And I think it's honestly a waste of space going from here to here, given the fact that in the fountain, right, you can still recover HP and mana even at the edge of the fountain, right? So if I stand right here, right, I can still recover HP, I can still purchase items, I can still sell them, I can still undo, right? Pretty much anything that you would need to do in the center of fountain at the edge, right? So a lot of players do this to save time and distance, right? Having to go back to lane a little bit faster this way, right? So instead of doing the dash from here, I really enjoy dashing from the inhibitor turret, right? So at this, there's going to be a little crevice here, right, that you can dash from. whether it's from blue side or red side, right? Top, bot, doesn't really matter. You'll be able to dash from here to the bush, right? Same thing on this side, right? So as long as you're at the little crevice here, before you're not allowed to move into that little space anymore, you're allowed to dash the exact same place. Okay. The next dash I want to briefly talk about is this one, the alcove dash. All you really need to know is you just need to be at the torch to do it. Right? As long as you're at the torch, you're able to dash. Right? Same thing on this side. Right? Exact same thing for top as well. Right? The little torches here. The only thing I dislike about this dash is just the fact that it's a little telegraphed. So if you don't get here in time, then you're still vulnerable to ganks on both sides. More likely on this side than here for the most part. So I highly recommend just playing off the walls here, as it's more volatile for you in lane, right? Whether you're looking to escape a short trade from, I don't know, like a Leona Pantheon trying to jump on you, right? You can buffer that CC with your E instead to get away. Just be careful about dashing if you don't have vision here, right? Here and here, right? Because if the enemy jungler is here, then they will still be there to gank you, right? Next, I want to talk about W angles. So this one is really important, really cheesy, in fact, right? So on playing blue side to red, you can W here at this angle. Right? It's really cheesy because Zeri's W by itself is already relatively long. So when you're able to get a W in like this, right? A lot of people don't expect this ginormous range, right? Because a lot of players have this tendency to kind of just recall kind of like near the wall especially, right? But it doesn't have to be just by the wall, right? You can look to W like this as well. I just like being able to abuse this one in particular if your team is ever able to zone them closer to the wall, as you're able to negate this entire space, right? Exact same thing on this side. It's a little bit easier on playing from red to blue side, as this there's like a little bit more room to work with, right? It makes hitting the W a lot easier too, because the angle is a lot tighter, so it makes it harder to escape from, right? If they're really immobile, so they would either have to burn a dash or use like flash, right? Something like that. Otherwise, you know, any other dash angle, W angle, that's going to be up to your guys' imagination, right? There are endless amounts of dashes that we could talk about, endless amounts of W angles that you could use, but finding the best one that fits your playstyle is the best way for me to explain, for you guys to, you know, find those angles. So other mechanics I really enjoy using on Zeri is stuff like Q Flash. So Q Flash is really good for chasing, right? To kind of secure a kill. Just be mindful that when you do Q Flash, your Q will follow the direction that which you initially cast it in, right? So if I cast it towards the right side and then I flash up, it's still going to follow the right side, right? It's only, like I just mentioned, it's only really good for chasing kills to secure. Alright, so generally when they're really low. Same thing with W Flash. So W Flash, you can it'll cast from wherever you were right before you flashed, right? It's really good for dodging skill shots, incoming skill shots, right, that you might need to avoid. Like, let's say this is a thrash, they're throwing a hook at you, right? Because when you use your W, you have to stand still for a small moment, right? So if you wanted to do anything aggressive, right? So like, let's say W flash forward, right, to abuse them for missing the hook, you could do something like that. Otherwise, just whatever you want to do, right? Like W flash out. Right, all of that is good. This next one I think is a really good one to know, R flash. So I really like R flash because it's a lot faster to cast this way. Not in terms of like actually using your ulti, it just catches a lot of people off guard, especially when you're trying to secure a kill if they're really low, and if like your Q or W might be like a little too hard to connect in the current moment, right? Or if I just know that I can kill them in that current moment, right? So the reason why our flash is really good is because there's a little wind up as you cast your ulti where Zeri jumps up and small cast time, right? So if you're ulting from far away, some people might be able to react to that. They'll be like, oh, this guy is ulting from so far, what the heck? But if you do our flash, then it's like, oh, all of a sudden the ulti connected and now you're on top of them, ready to use all your other like abilities, right? You still have your dash, your Q, your W, right? All of that other stuff. Right, next one is your EW, your ER. Right, so you can cast W in the middle of your dash. Same thing with your ulti. Right, same thing as you're riding the walls. You can cast W, cast ulti. Right, this next one is really important in terms of combat. So casting your passive auto, right? This one is really important in early game of all places, right? Where you're going to have like short trades, or sometimes if you're committing to like a kill, then you want to use your passive auto as much as possible, right? So the reason for this is because in early game, all amounts of damage add up, right? It's super important for making or breaking the difference in a kill, right? For a fight. And the best part about weaving in this passive auto is you can use it right after your Q, and you don't really lose a lot of time in terms of like moving, kiting, right? So for example, right, like I'm full attack speed right now, I'm capped out, so as you can see, I'm still having like, I still have enough time to just reposition myself as I cast in these passive autos in between my Qs. Right. Next mechanic, right? This is just a basic combo, to be honest, right? You can do QEQ, so it's a lot better to use in early game, especially when you don't really have that much attack speed, because I'm not sure if a lot of people realize, but your E is actually a Q reset. So if I try to Q right now, you can see how I have to wait a little bit before it comes back up. But if I were to dash, then my Q comes back up immediately. So that's one of the basic combos that you can do. And this last one is pretty much the same sequence, the same combo that we just mentioned, but a little bit different, right? So it's actually an animation cancel for your dash. So you're going to completely cancel your dash animation. You'll just be dashing in place, and you'll be able to insta cast your Q, right? So you have two Qs right on top of each other, right? So in order for this animation cancel to work, you need to make sure that you have auto attack turned on in your settings, and you need to make sure that your mouse is hovered on the enemy champion, right? Or even if it's not an enemy champion, whether it's the minion, turret, whatever, right? If it's targetable, it will work. So you need to passive auto first, QEQ, and then you'll be able to cancel your dash animation, right? So for example, right, so there I just casted two Qs right on top of each other. Right, if you're able to learn this animation cancel, it'll be really good, especially if you're running the Hob tree, because being able to just insta cast your Q right after the dash and having the attack speed lower your Q cooldown, it's going to be really strong for your early trades, especially when you consider the fact that sudden impact still applies on the in place dash, right? So right now it's 1384. If I do it again, now it's 1464, right? So we still get the sudden impact true damage for dashing in place. Okay, so how you want to play Zeri in the different stages of the game, right? So for early game, level 1, you don't really want to fight at all, given the fact that you only have your auto attacks, where basically Aphelios at level 1, but just shorter ranged. you know, because we only have these two abilities to use, right? Your passive and your Q. Whereas other champions, like let's say Caitlyn, right? You know, they have their auto attacks and her Q, right? So that other abilities like that, you know, Caitlyn Q has a lot of base damage in it. If you get hit by it, then you're going to be losing out a lot of HP. So try not to fight too much early game at all, or at level 1 specifically. Right, level 2, you can look for some more trades, right? Especially if you're getting level 2 first in lane. As you know, I just mentioned stuff like the animation cancel or the QEQ combo, right? Otherwise, levels 1 to 5, you know, you're typically just playing safe. You know, you want to look for short trades early. Level 6, you can commit to fights a lot better. You still prefer short trades, but up until you get the rest of your items, right? So mid to late game, you will start to transition more into a DPS, and you can look for extended trades, but just keep in mind that you still have strong bursts for the entire game, right? From beginning to end, your burst is going to be there. Right, so that being said, just going to briefly touch on matchups for Zeri and her synergies. So the ADC itself isn't really a big counter pick to Zeri, but more so the support pick instead. So keeping in mind that bot lane is a 2v2 lane, right? Oftentimes the support player dictates how the lane is played. Right, so like let's say Draven in particular is not really a big counter to Zeri, but having a support like Nautilus now makes him a big threat. But that's the case in pretty much every matchup, no matter what ADC I'm playing, right? Like whether I'm playing Kalista, Caitlyn, right, Ezreal, because Draven's just a lane bully. But the reason why having Nautilus makes him a big threat now is because they're able to look for dives. Right, but if say, you know, instead of Nautilus, he has a support like maybe Janna, I don't have to be as afraid of their all-ins. It's just a little bit tough to go for the kill on them instead, right? So, but regarding counter picks to you as an ADC, for the support pick, it's going to be champions like Nautilus, Rel, Alistar, right? Anyone who can kind of just like cripple you, right? Just keep you locked down. And in terms of the ADCs, right, it's going to be anyone who has like super high range or more mobility than you, right? So champions like Ashe, Vayne, Kalista, right? So Vayne and Kalista are skill matchups, more favored to them, but it's honestly not as hard compared to Ashe, to be honest, because Ashe just outspaces you every single time. Right, especially in the early stages of the game where, you know, she just slows you on every single auto attack, and you are so short ranged in comparison to Ashe, right? Her having her 600 range and typically running the rune approach velocity, where, you know, she'll have increased movement speed towards champions who have impaired movement, right? It just makes it really hard to escape from her, right? So levels 1 to 2, it's really important that you try not to trade against Ashe unless you have a good like early gank or a lockdown to from your support to abuse like any overextension. But otherwise, that's kind of it in terms of the matchups. As for the synergies for Zeri are just anyone who can keep up with her, give her more damage or set up kills, right? So her best already is just going to be Yuumi, right? Given the fact that she will attach to you no matter where you go, what adventure you want to go on with your E, right? She will still be with you, and Yuumi as a support just offers so much, honestly. Like Yuumi Zeri is just a strong combo if you get to scale, so that's already god tier support. After Yuumi, it's going to be champions like Nami, Rel, Bard, Leona. Those are the best supports that I can think of, the best supports that I really enjoy playing with as a Zeri player. So, you know, otherwise you can see the screenshot of the support synergies. Yeah, but that being said, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me if you guys do. If you guys want to have more information, then you guys can feel free to join the Discord to ask me stuff, right? And I'll be there to respond, answer your questions, right? Especially on stream. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.